Hello my friends, welcome to my channel, Cassia Emerald, and I'm here today to talk about something we both probably really interested on. There is spirituality and queerness. Also a little bit of literature, because why not? So on today's episode, we're going to be exploring the story of the Radical Faeries. Have you guys ever heard about them? I particularly haven't. But recently I have been reading some new things about the counter movement, about the 70s, and the queer community during that time that made so much for us today. So if today we can marry, we can openly be gay in so many levels, we need to honor them. They definitely built the road that we can walk on today. So I decided to tell their story on this episode and explore a little bit how they come up with the idea of being gay, but also being spiritual. How they match these ideas. At the same time, we have a huge increasement of the New Age movement, the paganism, the spirituality outside of the church or any other type of religions. And there was also political environment. If you think about the context of the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the big protests against the wars, and women's rights, the feminist movement, there's so much on all that. So let's go together on this journey, and I hope you really enjoy. And if you do, please don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button. That'll help me to keep producing content and keep me bringing topics that'll help you think, know a little bit more about our history and how spirituality, literature, and history all can come together when we think about our identity as queer people or as an ally or as a human being. Alright, so let's not wait longer, let's just dive into it. Are you excited? I am so excited to talk about the Radical Faeries. So thinking about the Arizona desert under the Labor Day sun of 1979, a group of over 200 gay men gathered together, but not to protest, not to party, but to pray, to dance, to even cry, and to reclaim something they definitely lost. So they call themselves the Radical Faeries. This, for them, was much more than just a meeting. It was a spiritual uprising, a search for meaning in the wake of marginalization, a reclamation of queerness, not as something that we need to fix or something that we need to hide, but something sacred, embodied, and also ancient. So today, we're going to be diving directly into the Radical Faerie movement. What it was, how it started, what it meant to the people involved, and what it still offers us today. We'll talk about its founders, its spiritual vision, its messy human conflicts, and its profound cultural impact on queer liberation. And we'll also explore the psychology behind it all. There is no way we can talk about queer history and not bring important topics like psychology, history, cultural movements, because that's how we emerge and that's how we still survive today. So what does it mean to find healing in a community? And how can reclaiming spirituality be revolutionary for queer people? You guys know, and I already told about that before, my main purpose of creating this channel was not only just about to share the history or to share literature or to share the ideas and path of spirituality, but fundamentally to create a tribe. I personally have been struggling so hard to find people who I want to connect to really want to have deep connections, deep conversations. So I was like, if I want to have deep conversations, why not create a YouTube channel that maybe I can find people who is interested in learning the same things I am. You guys know I don't have all the answers, and I am here basically trying to figure it out, studying, learning, and sharing it with you all. So if you are like that, you're also looking for a tribe. and I want to build this community around things that interest me. So I feel like that was the same that happened to them. They didn't want to just be revolutionary. They wanted to build community. They wanted to get together, create a safe space where they can just be themselves, share their ideas, share their concerns. Is my hair a little crazy today? You guys ignore it, please. So let's begin where it all started, with a conversation between Faerie and Don Kilhefner. I'm sorry, my pronunciation of his last name is going to be completely off. Let me try again. Kilhefner? You guys got it. I'm going to write it down here, and then you can also see the name in the description. So Faerie often is credited as the founder of the modern gay rights movement in America. And he had already helped create the Mattachine Society in 1950. Don, I'm going to call him Don because I don't know how to say his last name. So Don was a community organizer and a psychologist who had helped found the Los Angeles LGBT Center in 1971. So together, they began asking a question that few others were asking at the time. What is the spiritual essence of being gay? That is an amazing question even for today. So not just the political, not just the sexual, but the deeply human and transcendent part. This idea wasn't welcome in traditional religious spaces. And even in the gay rights movements, there was often an emphasis on assimilation. What was an assimilation? Was proving that gay people could be just like everyone else. But what if queerness wasn't something to assimilate, but something to celebrate on its own terms? So what if we didn't need to fit in the heterosexual box of behavior to be accepted? What if you could find what being gay, being queer, being LGBTQ really means in its essence, in its own way of living outside of any type of box? And that's why they were thinking about in the 70s. And you guys know me, there is no way I can talk about the Radical Faeries and talk about all that without driving deeply into the context. As a person who loves history, I always think in a way of like what was happening around them in the society, in the political environment. So for that reason, before we start exploring the origins and concepts and the history of the Radical Faeries itself, let's take a look at the cultural context of the 70s, even a little bit of the 60s and the 80s, that create environment for this group to emerge. So to understand the Faeries, we need to look at the world they are responding to. So in the late 60s and the 70s were a period of immense cultural upheaval. We had the Stonewall riots in 1969 that had lit a fire on the modern LGBTQ plus rights movement. We have the queer people were marching the streets, coming out publicly and demanding legal and social recognition. It was the era of the Gay Liberation Front, the ACT UP, and the birth of Pride as we know it. At the same time, the broader countercultural movement was in full swing. We had the civil rights activists, the feminists, and the anti-war protesters were challenging every form of authority, from the state to the church to the nuclear family. So the rise of the feminist spirituality, the New Age mysticism, and the back-to-land communities reflect a hunger for new, decentralized ways of living and also being. So for many, traditional religion and politics no longer offer truth or healing. The traditional spaces didn't accept us, didn't accept them. So we had the feminist spiritual movements in particular were forging a path that would deeply parallel the work of the Radical Faeries. We have writers like Mary Daly in her book Beyond God the Father. She's gonna call for rejection of patriarchal religion and a return to the goddess, a divine feminine root, embodiment, earth, and community. We have the Budapest feminism witchcraft, known as the Dianic Wicca, that's going to emerge in California around the same time the fairies were forming. Women gather in circles, create their own rituals, and reclaim ancient symbols of power and also pleasure. So these movements, they're going to share key values with the fairies, like no hierarchy, consent, embodiment, ecology, and radical love. So as Mary Daly wrote herself, when God is male, the male is God. So the fairies echo this rebellion by redefining spiritually itself, not in terms of male power or female submission, but in sacred queerness. So their gatherings were circles, not pyramids. Their theology was sensual. They were kindred spirits to feminism witches, earth priestesses, and countercultural seekers everywhere. And then there was a backlash. We had the Nixon era heading power conservative forces. And then we had the election of Ronald Reagan in 1980, would usher in a new wave of right-wing rhetoric rooted in Christian fundamentalism and neoliberal individualism. Unfortunately, we also had the AIDS crisis looming around. We had the police brutality and public discrimination against the LGBTQ plus people that all remain widespread. So imagine being a gay man in that exactly moment. On one hand, you are told to fight for equality by being just like everyone else, respectable, professional, monogamous. In the other, your lived experience, your love, your desire, your trauma, and your longing for connection don't fit those boxes at all. So the radical fairies emerge in this in-between space, rejecting both assimilation and shame, and also offering something deeply needed, a space where queerness could be sacred, could be playful, could be embodied, and could be collective. Alright, so now that we understand a little bit of the context where this group emerged from, let's talk about a particular story. In 1978, the Southeastern Conference of Lesbians and Gay Men planted a really important seed. It was there that a group of gay men, including Michael Wilson, owner of the Running Water Farm in North Carolina, they sat together and had a realization. They would never have a space to just be gay men together. Not just like sexually, but spiritually, even like emotionally. So then Michael invited them to his farm the following summer, and from that invitation, the Radical Faeries were born. And the first Radical Faerie gathering is going to take place in the Labor Day weekend in 1979 at an Asheron in the Southern Desert in Arizona. Over 220 men is going to show up for this gathering. They cook food together, they dance in drag, they build ritual circles, they invoke the spirits of queer ancestors like Walt Whitman and Harvard Milk. They did massage, trance work, and spiritual storytelling. And really important, they also cried a lot. For many, it was the first time they felt like they were safe and holy as a queer man. They felt like they're not wrong. They felt like they didn't need to be ashamed. They felt like they didn't need to hide themselves. It was a space for just being who you are. That is extremely important. Even nowadays that we kind of can be so open and accepted, even though we still struggle with a lot of discrimination. But in that time, we can imagine how much worse it was. So these 220 men just get together to be, just to be. And because of that, it wasn't about religion. The fairies had no doctrine, no dogma, but they were full of spirit. They reject hierarchy and embrace consensus. They honor nature and each other's bodies. They create something ancient and new at the same exactly time. They create a queer tribe leaving the cracks between the systems. So the radical fairies were radical, not just because they were gay, but because they believed in a different kind of power. A power rooted in softness, in listening, in storytelling, in shared meals, and sacred drag. They weren't trying to climb the ladder of acceptance. They were throwing the ladder out and dancing in a circle around a fire instead. In time, the fairy movement spread. Sanctuaries were formed. We had the Running Water in North Carolina, the Shore Mountain in Tennessee, the Wolf Creek in Oregon, the Folly in France. Sorry my pronunciation, I don't speak French. So at these places, queer people of all gender, races, identities came together to live off the land, perform rituals, and create what they call the communities of the heart. So the fairies explore sustainability, consensual living, erotic ritual, and collective dreaming. They told stories around fires, wrote poetry, held hands in silence, and drummed together in ecstasy. They call it subject-subject consciousness. It's the idea that every being is sacred, not as an object to be used, but as a soul to be known. Do you guys understand the dimension of this phrase? It's the idea that every being is sacred, not as an object to be used, but as a soul to be known. Meaning that you are sacred, not because of your body and not because you're something that I can get advantage of, only based on the fact that you have a soul, you are a being, and for that you deserve to be known by who you truly are, authentically are. And that's how they based this whole community together. So Don Kay later clarified that the movement was not part of the pagan revival of the time. It wasn't born from the 60s counterculture either. Its roots, he said, were in evolutionary biology, in gay historical consciousness, and the deep spirituality. Don hosted workshops called Gay Voices and Visions, where they studied Whitman, Edward Carpenter, and others queer prophets of a hidden lineage. They weren't trying to mimic heteronormative religion. They were creating something entirely, completely different. An indigenous, queer spirituality. But, of course, the fairies were not without conflict. The early days were full of tension between visionaries. We have Mitch Walker, a gay Jungian writer, believed that queerness needed to be explored psychologically, through shadow work, through archetypes, inner rituals. Harry Hay, however, rejected that. He saw psychology as a tool of oppression. So these disagreements eventually caused deep rifts in the early group. Don himself left when he felt that the movement was becoming more about Harry's personal beliefs than the collective spiritual evolution. So he spoke openly about the struggles, even as he continued to champion the core message that gay people had a unique spiritual path to walk. Despite all this, fairy movement endured. It spread across the globe, from mountain retreats in Tennessee to forest gatherings in Australia. The Radical Faeries built a web of connection. They gathered not to debate politics, but to heal, to dance, to remember their ancestors. So now I ask you, why does this story matter? Why revisit now? Because queer people still need spaces like this. Spaces where we are seen. Spaces where we can just be ourselves. In a different dimensions for different type of people. Not just because we are all queer, that we like the same things and we see the world the same way. We just need spaces where our individuality can show and we can be together as a tribe. Doesn't matter what tribe it is. It could be the tribe for queer people who love literature, who love sports, who love to dance, who love to hike, who love to club and live in the cities, who want to live in the middle of nowhere in a forest. We have our individuality, but behind all that, we just wanted to be seen, accepted as different, not inside a box. We just want space to heal. So we still live in a world that tries to flatten us, to define us, to push into boxes that we don't fit. And the fairies offer a different way. They offer an inspiration what we could do, the power we have as a tribe, the power we have as a community to get together, to accept each other. We are not perfect, we are not easy, but these all can be so transformative. They can teach us that queerness isn't a label. It's a way of seeing the world, of relating, of healing. They remind us that ritual doesn't need to be so complicated, that nature can be our cathedral, that our bodies can be sacred, that being together honestly and vulnerably is itself a form of spiritual resistance. What I understand is that to be a radical fairy is to say, my queerness is not a shame. It is a power, it's a path. May we all be brave enough to follow it. You can find your own tribe. You deserve to have a place where you're safe, where you have people around you who truly see you by who you are and they love it. We deserve to be out of violence and discrimination and shame or even hiding. That's why I create this channel. And I thank you so much for being here, for watching this video. And if you enjoy it, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, share with your friends. That will help me, motivate me to keep bringing videos. And I hope this story moved you. I hope this story inspired you, the same way it inspired me. And if it did, please write in the comments below, what do you think about that? How this story moved you? What did it make you think about? I hope you'll find your way for happiness. I hope you'll find your own way to be yourself. So I will definitely see you in the next video. Ciao!